She disappeared for 3 days. No texts, no calls, phone straight to voicemail. When she came back, she didn't apologize, didn't explain, just walked in, opened the fridge, and said she needed a break from him. He smiled, said she was right, then waited for her to leave and canceled everything.
She disappeared for 3 days and called it independence. He called it something else. My name is Marcus, 27 years old. I work as a cameraman for a local TV station, steady schedule, decent income, and work that actually keeps me engaged. Not glamorous, but it's mine. Annie was 25 when all of this happened. We'd been together a year and a half. I met her when she was working at her family's bakery, small place. Neighborhood regulars, the kind of shop that doesn't make anyone rich but runs on reputation and loyalty. She'd studied culinary arts, so in theory it was her world. She liked decorating cakes, testing recipes, the craft of it. She wasn't a professional chef yet, but she had the foundation. She had potential. The first year was straightforward. We split costs where we could, kept our own routines, made it work around my irregular hours and her early bakery shifts. Nothing dramatic. The kind of relationship that runs quietly because it's actually functional. Then the bakery closed. It didn't collapse overnight, it was a slow slide. Sales dropped, supplier issues piled up, and eventually the family made the call. For Annie, it wasn't just a job loss. That place was part of her identity. The first few days after the closure, she was completely flat hours of silence, staring at her phone, lying in bed without moving toward anything. I made a decision. I offered to support her financially while she got back on her feet. She didn't ask directly, I proposed it. She was my girlfriend. She was going through something real. I had the ability to help, so I did. We started running almost entirely on my income. To make it practical, I added her to my bank account as a secondary cardholder, a linked card she could use without having to ask me every time. I didn't set hard limits. I trusted her, and I figured my income level would naturally prevent anything excessive. It worked at first. She covered basics, went out with friends, occasionally normal spending. I actively encouraged her to start looking for work or get back into something food-related. I suggested courses, home-based catering ideas, selling baked goods locally. She'd say she was thinking about it. There were never any concrete steps. Weeks passed, then months. At some point, any mention of working disappeared entirely from her vocabulary.
He offered support as a bridge. She treated it as a destination. Those two things are not the same, and the gap between them only widens with time.
What filled the space where job searching used to be was TikTok. I don't mean casual scrolling. I mean it became her primary activity, the thing that structured her day. She built a network of online friends, women I never met in person, but whose names started appearing in conversations, whose messages I'd catch glimpses of when she showed me something on her phone. At first it seemed like a normal online community. Shared videos, recommendations, everyday conversation. But gradually, the tone of what was filtering into our apartment changed. Annie started using language she hadn't used before. Comments about independence, about not owing anyone an explanation, about not being accountable to a partner for her choices. None of those ideas are wrong on their own. The problem was the context they arrived alongside a specific shift in how she treated me. Before, she mentioned purchases casually. Not because I demanded it, just natural communication between two people sharing a financial life. That stopped. She started responding shorter, flatter, with an edge that hadn't been there before. Then one evening she told me she wanted a fixed monthly allowance instead of the card. I asked why. She already had access to the account. No limits, no justifications required. She said she didn't want to feel like she had to ask permission to spend money. She wanted her own amount, like a stipend. I sat with that for a moment. She had a card with open access to my account. I had never once asked her to explain a purchase, never questioned what she spent, never made her feel monitored. So where exactly was the permission asking happening? I said no, calmly, but clearly. I explained that switching to a cash allowance system didn't make sense when she already had direct access, and that rather than formalizing a dependency structure, the better move was to start generating her own income. She didn't argue loudly, but something in the apartment shifted after that. She got quieter, more distant, spent more time on her phone and less time present with me. I told myself it was a phase, that the online environment was amplifying something she'd worked through. I was wrong. One evening I came home from a shoot that ran long, tired, expecting the usual her on the couch. Some show playing, maybe something left over in the kitchen. The apartment was empty. I wasn't immediately alarmed. Maybe she'd gone to a friend's, maybe her mom's. I sent a message asking where she was. No reply. 2 hours later, I tried again. Nothing. Called her directly. Straight to voicemail. That's when the unease started. This wasn't her pattern. Even when she went out late, she'd send something, a quick message, a location, something. Complete silence wasn't normal. I barely slept. The next morning I tried again. Calls, messages, checked her social media for any activity. Nothing visible. At that point, my mind was running scenarios. Something had happened. She was hurt. There was an emergency I didn't know about. I called her mother. Didn't have a close relationship with her, but it was cordial enough. Her mother answered, and, before I could finish explaining, told me with complete calm not to worry. Annie was fine. She'd be back in a couple of days. I asked where she was. She didn't tell me, just repeated, "Fine, coming back soon." I put the phone down, more unsettled than before. The relief that she wasn't in danger immediately mixed with something else, the dawning recognition that this wasn't an accident. This was a choice. Day 2, day 3, nothing. I kept going to work, kept checking my phone. The worry had fully converted into something harder and more clear-eyed. She had decided to disappear, and someone close to her had known about it and chosen not to tell me. If you've ever been in a relationship where your partner treated your basic concern as an imposition, you already know what the next part felt like before I tell it. Drop it in the comments, because I want to know if I was the only one asking myself whether I'd somehow caused this. She came back on day 3, no signs of distress, no exhaustion, no indication that anything unusual had occurred. She walked in the way you walk in from a grocery run, set her bag on the table, kicked off her shoes, moved toward the kitchen. I stood there watching her for a few seconds, waiting for something, an opening line, an explanation, anything spontaneous. Nothing came. "Where have you been?" She opened the fridge, looked at the shelves, pulled out a water bottle, didn't look at me when she answered. Actually, she didn't answer at all. The question landed and disappeared. I waited a beat, then said it again, clearer. "Annie, where were you for 3 days?" She closed the fridge, turned her head toward me slightly. Her expression was completely neutral, not defensive, not guilty, not searching for words. "I went out to have fun and take a break from you." The delivery was what hit, not angry, not provocative, just matter of fact, like she was reporting the weather. I repeated it back to her. "A break from me." She took a sip of water and gave a small shrug. "Yeah, that's it." No elaboration, no context. "No, I needed space, and here's what was going on for me." Just a statement, offered like it closed the topic. I kept my voice level. "You didn't think to send the message? One text saying you were okay?" She let out a short, dry laugh. "What would I even need to notify you of? That you weren't going to be home for 3 days, that you weren't going to answer your phone, that you were alive." Now she looked at me directly, and I noticed something in her eyes I hadn't seen before, not in a year and a half. Distance, not physical. The other kind. Like she'd quietly moved to a different framework and hadn't mentioned it. "I didn't have to notify anyone," she said. "I'm not a child." "I never said you were." "Then stop acting like you need to know everything I do." "That's not everything," I said. "That's 3 days of silence." She rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic." I changed approach. "Who were you with?" "Friends." "Which friends?" "The ones from TikTok." "You met them in person?" "Now I have." "Where did you stay?" She looked up, clearly done with the line of questions. "Why does that matter to you?" "Because you're my girlfriend." She didn't respond to that. Just let the silence sit there between us like it was an answer. Then she said it. Looked at me directly, no hesitation, and said, "That doesn't matter. I'm an independent woman." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I smiled. Not big, not theatrical, just enough to change the temperature of the room. "You know what? You're right," I said. "I think I've been underestimating you." Her expression shifted, the defensiveness dropped, replaced by something that looked like satisfaction. "Forget my questions," I added. "Do what's best for you, because like you said, you're independent." She actually smiled back. First time since she'd walked in. "Finally," she said, "something that makes sense." "I'll let you get settled," I said. "You mentioned going to your mom's later?" "Yeah, just came to shower and change." "Take your time." She went to the bathroom, water running. The sound of her moving through the apartment the way she had for a year and a half. The moment the bathroom door clicked shut, I picked up my phone.
She heard agreement. He was already 3 steps ahead. That smile wasn't surrender. It was a door closing quietly.
I called the bank first, requested immediate cancellation of the secondary card linked to my account. The rep asked a few standard questions. No lengthy explanation needed. The process took under 5 minutes. When I hung up, I stood in the middle of the apartment and looked at it properly, maybe for the first time in months. Her clothes in the closet, her skincare products lined up in the bathroom, her things on the nightstand, on the kitchen counter, on the shelf by the door. Objects that had represented shared life an hour ago. They looked different now. I started collecting them, no rushing, no throwing things. Methodical item by item, moving through the apartment the same way I do any organized task at work. Clothing, toiletries, personal items, everything that was hers. I found a large black garbage bag in the cleaning closet and filled it steadily. It took a while. She had more here than I'd consciously registered. When the bag was full and tied, I carried it to the front door and set it outside in the hallway. Not inside, outside. Then I picked up my phone again. 6 months earlier, I'd added Annie as a beneficiary on my health insurance not required. Just something I'd done because she wasn't working and I wanted her covered. It had seemed like the right thing at the time. I called the insurance provider, requested her removal from the plan. Standard questions, standard process, done in under 30 minutes. I set the phone on the table and sat down. No immediate relief, no satisfaction. Something quieter than both of those. A kind of settled clarity, the feeling you get when a decision you've been circling finally gets made. The shower turned off. I heard her moving around, getting dressed. Then the sound of her picking up her bag. The front door opened. She almost walked into the black bag sitting in the hallway. She moved it, came back inside, and looked at me with genuine confusion. "What is that?" I didn't answer immediately. She set her bag down, walked toward me. "Hey, I'm talking to you." "Your stuff," I said. "Why is it outside?" Before I could answer, she pulled out her phone, looked at the screen, then looked up. "Why isn't the card working? I tried to buy a coffee on the way here and it was declined." I met her eyes. "You're independent, right?" I said. Same neutral tone she'd used on me an hour ago. "Get your own money. The confusion on her face shifted into something that didn't have a clean name. Disbelief. Maybe the specific kind that comes when something you assumed was permanent turns out not to be. What? You heard me. You canceled the card? Yes. Are you serious? You can't do that. I already did. That wasn't what I meant by independent. Then you should have explained what you meant, I said. Because what you did was disappear for 3 days, not contact me once, and come back and tell me your personal choices are none of my business. That's not a relationship. That's a roommate who doesn't pay rent. You're being dramatic. I just needed space. And limits. That word limit seemed to ignite something. This is manipulation, she said. You're punishing me. I'm adjusting to what you told me. You said you're independent. I'm respecting that. You're twisting my words. I'm not. You said what you said. I'm just taking it seriously. Her breathing got heavier. You're heartless. I didn't respond to that. You know what this shows? She continued. It shows exactly the kind of person you are. Maybe, I said. Or it shows I'm not going to keep funding someone who doesn't want to be accountable in a relationship. She laughed sharp, loaded with frustration. How little of a man do you have to be to pull something like this? That one landed differently, but not the way she intended. Little enough to not accept this, I said. Is that the bar? You're taking everything away at once. I'm not taking anything that was yours. I'm stopping giving you what I was providing. She put both hands on her head, exhaled hard. This isn't what I meant by independence. Then you should have been clearer before you disappeared for 3 days and told me your life was none of my concern. Brief silence. Then, like she'd suddenly remembered something, she looked at me differently. The insurance, she said. That's still active, right? I held her gaze. No, her face shifted again. Harder this time. What do you mean no? I removed you from the plan. Are you kidding me? No. She went completely still for a few seconds. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, not softer, just different. You're disgusting, maybe. But I'm not going to stay in a dynamic where you decide when you show up, when you disappear, and what I'm allowed to ask while I quietly keep paying for everything. Her eyes filled. Not the kind of crying that's searching for comfort, the kind that comes when frustration and anger have nowhere left to go. You can't do this to me, not after everything we've been through. Because of everything we've been through, I said. What you did doesn't match what we had. I just wanted to feel free, she said, voice breaking. I didn't want to depend on you for everything. Then start supporting yourself, I said. That landed hard. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. This isn't going to stay like this. I don't expect it to. She looked at the bag by the door, looked at me, and something in the room shifted in a way that couldn't be undone, the kind of shift you don't feel immediately, but you recognize the next morning when you wake up and the space is different. She left without another word.
She called it punishment. He called it consistency. The difference is who was paying attention to the agreement they'd actually made.
I didn't expect the story to continue. I thought it ended when the door closed. It didn't. 2 days later, a coworker walked over to my desk, phone in hand, with that specific expression people have when they're about to show you something they're not sure you want to see. Hey, isn't this your girlfriend? It was Annie, on TikTok, recording herself, serious tone, controlled delivery, the kind of video people make when they want to seem like they're being brave. I watched the whole thing. In it, she described being in a relationship with a controlling man who made her feel dependent, who pressured her to work, not for her own growth, but according to her, to fund his habits. At one point, she implied, without stating it directly, that I had a drinking problem. I sat with that for a second. I don't drink regularly. I'm not someone who's had a single conversation about alcohol being an issue in my life. But in the structure of the story she was building, the detail fit perfectly. It explained the financial control, made the relationship darker, made her escape more justified. She described her 3-day disappearance as a conscious decision to step back and find clarity. Framed it as recognizing she was in a toxic situation. No mention of the context. No mention of 18 months of me covering her expenses. No mention of the card, the insurance, the months of no job search. A cleaner story, one where she was a woman escaping, not a woman being held accountable. At the end of the video, she mentioned a podcast run by an influencer where women shared their experiences with difficult partners, said she was planning to go on and tell her full story. The video moved. Not viral, but enough. Enough for comments. Enough for shares in small circles. And then something happened that I had nothing to do with. One of the comments from an account I recognized as someone from that same online friend group she'd been spending time with said something plain and direct. Stop lying. Nobody forced you to do anything. You just didn't want to work and now you want to play the victim. It wasn't elaborate, but it was specific, and it came from someone who apparently knew enough to say it. That comment got responses. People started asking follow-up questions. Others noticed the gaps in her account, the things she avoided, the details that didn't connect. The narrative started developing cracks, not from any outside attack, but from its own internal inconsistencies. I didn't comment, didn't post anything, didn't reach out to anyone, didn't show up anywhere in that conversation. Pay attention here because this part matters. When a story can't hold its own weight, you don't need to push it. It falls on its own timeline. A few days later, she posted a second video. This one she was crying, genuinely upset, or at least genuinely feeling something real. She talked about how hard it was to speak publicly, about how cruel people online could be, about how nobody knew what she'd actually lived through. She mentioned the negative comments. said she didn't understand why she was being attacked for telling her truth, but the audience watching the second video had already seen the first one, and the comments, and the cracks. The response to the second video wasn't sympathy. It was sharper, more skeptical, some people referencing her friend's comment, some pointing out that her story had shifted, some turning the whole thing into a reaction format. Within a small corner of the platform, the second video became something closer to a punchline. I watched all of it from the outside, didn't engage, didn't try to redirect it.
She took the story public expecting control of the narrative. The first person who knew the real version ended it. You can't manage a story when the people closest to you know the truth.
Here's what the 3 days cost her. The card, gone. 18 months of open access, no questions asked, no limits enforced, canceled in a 5-minute phone call, the insurance removed. A benefit she'd had without asking for it, extended because I thought it was the right thing to do, reversed the same afternoon she walked out. The apartment cleared. Every item she'd accumulated in a space that had functionally been her home packed into one bag and left outside the door. The online story collapsed. Not by anything I did, by someone in her own circle who chose honesty over loyalty at exactly the wrong moment for her. The podcast appearance, as far as I know, it never happened. The relationship, done. Not in an argument, not in a dramatic final confrontation in a 5-minute phone call to a bank while she showered in the next room. I didn't feel righteous about any of it, didn't feel like I'd won something. What I felt was the specific quietness of a decision that's already been made when there's nothing left to debate because the other person already told you everything you needed to know. She said she was independent. I agreed. The rest was just consequences following logic. 6 months later, I'm still at the same station, same job, same apartment now with $300 a month I wasn't spending before. I haven't heard from her. I haven't looked for her. I don't think about what she's posting. I do think occasionally about the version of her that sat quietly in a bakery and built something honest with her hands. I wonder sometimes what would have happened if the bakery hadn't closed, or if I'd pushed back earlier, or if TikTok had been a smaller part of the picture. Then I stopped wondering, because that's not the story that actually happened. The story that happened is the one where someone called me a break she needed and found out that breaks have costs. She found out the hard way.